Ethan Miller did not expect anything from the evening except discomfort, and that was why it moved so fast the moment he stepped into the small Italian restaurant near the river in Boston, a place chosen by his sister because it was neutral and calm, words that did nothing to ease the tight feeling in his chest as he checked his phone and saw the message saying his blind date would be 10 minutes late, which gave him just enough time to regret agreeing to come at all, because dating again felt like reopening a door he had carefully shut after his breakup, a breakup that ended quietly but left him hollow, and as he sat there watching couples talk and laugh, he wondered if he was forcing himself forward before he was ready, when suddenly the door opened and a woman stepped inside who changed the rhythm of his thoughts completely, because he knew her walk, her posture, and the gentle way she paused as if she didn't want to interrupt the room, and when he looked up fully, his breath caught as recognition hit him all at once. Because the woman standing there was Linda Parker, the mother of his ex-girlfriend, a woman he had not seen in over 2 years, yet somehow looked exactly the same and completely different at once, calmer, softer, and carrying a quiet loneliness he hadn't noticed before, and for a brief moment they simply stared at each other across the room as if time had tripped over itself, and Ethan considered pretending he hadn't seen her, but that thought disappeared when Linda's eyes widened in surprise and then softened into a polite, careful smile, the kind people wear when life throws them into an unexpected moment and they choose grace over confusion, and she walked toward him with slow steps that carried both confidence and uncertainty, and when she said his name, it sounded warmer than he remembered, and when he answered her, his voice betrayed his surprise but not his respect, and they exchanged quick questions that tumbled over each other, asking what the other was doing there, each realizing at the same time that this meeting had not been planned by anyone, because Linda explained that she was supposed to meet someone for a blind date arranged by a coworker, but the man had cancelled last minute, and she had already driven there and ordered tea, and Ethan explained his own situation, that he was waiting for someone he had never met and wasn't sure he wanted to, and in that moment the tension between past and present hovered unspoken between them, because both knew their connection was complicated by history, but neither felt discomfort or shame, only surprise, and when the waiter approached and asked if everything was okay, Linda hesitated, then looked at Ethan, and something about the honesty in his eyes made her ask if she could sit for a few minutes instead of leaving right away, and Ethan moved his chair back quickly, saying yes without thinking, because it felt natural, as if this meeting had already decided its own direction, and as Linda sat down, Ethan noticed details he hadn't before, like the way her hands rested calmly on the table, or how she listened even when no one was speaking, and the conversation moved fast, not because they rushed, but because silence didn't slow them down, as they talked about small, safe things at first, like traffic, work schedules, and how blind dates always seemed more stressful than exciting, but soon the talk deepened without effort, because both were tired of pretending they were fine when they weren't. And Linda spoke about living alone after years of being surrounded by family noise, about how quiet evenings felt heavier than busy days, and Ethan spoke about his breakup without blame or bitterness, explaining how love sometimes fades not from lack of care but from different directions, and Linda listened with a kind of attention that made Ethan forget he had ever felt rushed or judged in past relationships, and he realized how rare it was to speak without needing to defend himself, and Linda, in turn, saw Ethan not as her daughter's former partner, but as a grown man shaped by loss and responsibility, someone who carried his emotions carefully instead of loudly, and as the restaurant filled and emptied around them, neither noticed the time passing, and when Ethan's phone buzzed again with a message from his blind date canceling altogether, he didn't feel relief or disappointment, only a quiet certainty that he was exactly where he needed to be, and Linda laughed gently when he showed her the message, saying, "Maybe the universe had strange timing," and that simple sentence lingered between them longer than it should have, because it felt true, and when the waiter returned with the check, both reached for it at the same time and laughed, the sound easy and unforced, surprising both of them, and outside, the air felt cooler and sharper, grounding them back into reality, where consequences and questions still existed, and as they stood near the entrance, neither wanted to end the moment too quickly, but neither wanted to overstep, and Linda thanked Ethan for the company, saying the evening had turned out kinder than she expected, and Ethan replied honestly that he hadn't planned on feeling lighter when he walked out, but he did, and they stood there for a second too long, aware of the unspoken line between familiarity and something new, and when Linda finally turned to leave, Ethan watched her walk away with a strange pull in his chest, realizing that this single, accidental meeting had stirred something he thought was done, not desire or rebellion, but a quiet sense of possibility, and as he headed to his car, he knew this night would not fade like the others, because some moments arrive fast, change you quickly, and leave you standing at the edge of a story you never planned to begin. After that unexpected meeting at the restaurant, Ethan and Linda couldn't seem to stop thinking about each other, and what started as a simple exchange of polite texts quickly grew into long phone calls that stretched into the night, where they shared small details about their days, funny observations, and quiet frustrations, and even though both were careful to keep boundaries in mind, there was an undeniable comfort that neither had felt with anyone else in a long time, a comfort that made the days pass faster and the weeks feel shorter. Because every message brought a sense of anticipation and every phone call left a warm lingering feeling that neither could ignore. Eventually, they agreed to meet again, this time at a cozy coffee shop by the river, and as they sat across from each other with steaming cups in hand, the conversation flowed naturally, first light and playful, teasing about bad movies and failed attempts at cooking, then slowly deeper, exploring their fears, regrets, and hopes, and Ethan found himself telling Linda things he hadn't shared with anyone in years, about how lonely he had felt after his breakup, about the emptiness of routine days, and about the quiet longing for connection that never left him, while Linda listened with a presence that was steady, warm, and attentive, never rushing, never judging, making him feel like he had found someone who truly saw him, and she in turn shared her own stories, about the small triumphs of her career as a librarian, about how the house felt too big and too quiet since her daughter moved away, about the moments of doubt when she wondered if she would ever find companionship again, and Ethan realized that her vulnerability didn't feel like weakness but like trust, and the more they shared, the more they understood that what had begun as a chance encounter was turning into something meaningful, something neither had expected, because it was not about impulsive attraction but about the comfort of two people who had walked through their own difficulties and were now meeting in a place of quiet understanding. As the days passed, their meetings became more frequent, walks in the park, dinners at simple neighborhood restaurants, even running small errands together, and in every interaction, they discovered layers of each other that were new and intriguing. Ethan admired Linda's gentle patience and her thoughtful way of seeing the world, noticing how she remembered small details about people and situations, while Linda was drawn to Ethan's steady kindness, the way he listened and responded with care, and how he seemed to have grown into a man who understood life's disappointments yet still carried hope. And in these moments, laughter came easily, touching on shared experiences and gentle teasing about how awkward first meetings always were, and in their laughter was an unspoken acknowledgement that something significant was forming between them, something neither could deny, yet both understood that stepping forward required caution because of the history involved, because of the connection to her daughter, and because they were navigating uncharted territory together, aware of potential judgments but determined to focus on the reality of their feelings rather than imagined obstacles. And so they continued, week after week, discovering the comfort of presence, the thrill of attention, and the gentle tension that grew in quiet glances and subtle touches, each moment building an emotional intimacy that neither rushed but that neither could escape. And as they shared more of themselves, they began talking about the future in small ways, discussing dreams, fears, and the kind of life they wanted, realizing that they were imagining each other in those visions, which brought both excitement and hesitation, because the idea of pursuing love so unexpectedly was thrilling yet frightening, and yet neither could deny the pull, the steady, quiet pull that had started the night they met. And one evening, as they walked along the river under the soft glow of streetlights, Ethan felt a surge of courage he hadn't anticipated, the kind that comes when your heart knows something before your mind is ready, and he noticed Linda walking a little closer, her hand brushing against his, an innocent gesture that felt electric, and when she looked up at him and smiled, he realized that the connection between them was no longer casual or fleeting but something deeper, a mutual understanding and attraction that had quietly grown, and in that moment, he wanted to tell her how he truly felt, but the words caught in his throat because he also wanted to respect her, their history, and the life she had lived so far. And Linda, sensing the hesitation in his gaze, reached out and gently held his hand for a few seconds, a simple action that spoke volumes, showing that she too felt the same growing bond. that she too was navigating these unexpected feelings, and as they continued walking, they laughed softly about small things, yet beneath the laughter was an unspoken question about what this meant and where it could lead, a thrilling uncertainty that neither wanted to rush but could not ignore. And over the next few weeks, their connection strengthened. Built on shared experiences, long conversations, and moments of quiet reflection, and every meeting brought new insights, new feelings, and new hope that something genuine was possible, and Ethan found himself looking forward to each encounter not out of habit but because he wanted to be with her, to hear her voice, to share in the simplicity of presence that had become unexpectedly precious, and Linda, too, discovered a warmth she hadn't realized she had been missing, a sense of being understood and appreciated, a gentle reminder that life could surprise you with joy when least expected, and through all of this, they maintained an unspoken respect for each other's pace, never forcing emotions, never rushing intimacy, allowing the relationship to grow organically, and in this slow but steady progression, the foundation for something extraordinary began to form, built on honesty, vulnerability, and a quiet courage to follow the heart despite doubts, and in these moments, Ethan realized that he had never felt so alive, so seen, and so ready to explore a connection that could defy expectations, while Linda felt a thrilling possibility she hadn't anticipated, the sense that two people could find each other later in life and discover a love that was real, grounded, and full of hope, and as the evening ended, they parted with the gentle understanding that this was only the beginning, a chapter neither had planned but one that promised laughter, understanding, emotional closeness, and the slow, unfolding excitement of a love story that felt both surprising and inevitable. Leaving both of them thinking of each other long after the goodbye, imagining the next meeting, and feeling the quiet thrill that comes when hearts start to trust and lean towards something entirely new, knowing that what had started by chance was now growing into something intentional, tender, and full of possibility, a love story unfolding not in haste but with care, honesty, and the gentle magic of two people discovering each other's hearts. As Ethan and Linda spent more time together, their connection grew deeper and more undeniable, and what had started as casual meetings and light conversations slowly transformed into something charged with quiet emotion and subtle tension, because every shared coffee, every walk in the park, every dinner together carried the weight of unspoken feelings, and they both felt it, even when neither dared to name it aloud. And Ethan realized that his heart had begun to trust again, that the loneliness he had carried after his breakup was slowly easing, replaced by a warmth that grew stronger each time Linda smiled at him or laughed at his jokes, and Linda, in turn, noticed how Ethan's presence brought her a comfort she hadn't realized she had been craving, how easy it was to share her thoughts with him, and how safe and seen she felt in a way she hadn't experienced in years, and as days turned into weeks, they began to speak more openly about the complications their relationship could bring, because both knew this was no ordinary connection, and it was clear to Ethan that pursuing feelings for his ex-girlfriend's mother could invite judgment, questions, and misunderstandings, yet he could not ignore the bond forming between them, nor could Linda, who felt a flutter of excitement whenever he was near, even as she reminded herself to be careful, to respect boundaries, and to consider the life she had lived and the family around her. Yet the heart wants what it wants, and in the quiet moments of shared laughter, tender glances, and meaningful conversations, it became impossible to deny that their feelings were real, that there was a depth to their connection that neither had expected, and one evening, as they sat in a small downtown bistro, the world outside fading into the background, Ethan found himself looking at Linda with a clarity that surprised him, seeing not just the woman he knew through his ex, but a person full of life, wisdom, humor, and warmth, someone who could understand his past, share his present, and maybe even shape his future. And as he watched her sip her tea, the quiet determination in her eyes sparked a bold thought in him, the kind of thought that makes the heart race and the mind tremble with possibility, and he knew he had to speak, to take a step that could change everything, because waiting any longer might mean losing the courage to act, and Linda, sensing the intensity in his gaze, shifted slightly. Her curiosity piqued, her heart opening to the possibility that he might be feeling the same as she did, and in that charged silence, Ethan felt his pulse quicken, the words forming in his mind with a clarity that left no room for doubt, the words that had been building quietly with every moment they had spent together, with every shared story, every smile, every gentle touch that lingered just long enough to be meaningful. and he realized that this connection was not fleeting, not a momentary spark, but a steady flame that had grown into warmth and light and hope, and he could not ignore it any longer, and leaning slightly forward, with a voice steady but full of emotion, he said, "Linda, can I ask you something?" And Linda looked at him, surprised but attentive, the anticipation palpable, and he continued before fear could stop him, speaking words that were both bold and tender, words that revealed the depth of his feelings and his willingness to embrace uncertainty if it meant being with her. "Do you want to marry me?" And the room seemed to pause, as if time itself was holding its breath, because the question was not just about a proposal, it was about courage, honesty, and a willingness to open their hearts fully, and Linda's expression shifted through surprise, disbelief, and a quiet thrill, the kind that comes when life presents an unexpected chance for love that is profound and real, and for a long moment, she did not speak, because words seemed inadequate to capture the rush of emotions, the mix of joy, shock, longing, and hope that filled her chest, yet in that silence, a connection stronger than words passed between them, a recognition that this moment was extraordinary, that something rare and beautiful had arrived unexpectedly, and Ethan, seeing the emotions play across her face, felt a mixture of vulnerability and certainty, knowing that he had risked rejection but also knowing that he had been honest, that he had taken the step his heart demanded, and Linda, taking a deep breath, allowed herself to feel the possibility, the thrill of imagining a future with someone who truly saw her, appreciated her, and had chosen her with full awareness of the past and present, and even though questions lingered about what others might think or how complicated it could become, in that instant they both understood that love, genuine and deep, often defies expectations, and that courage sometimes means asking the hardest questions at the exact moment your heart demands it, and as they sat there, the world outside faded, leaving only the two of them and the extraordinary potential of a love neither had anticipated, but both had quietly longed for. And in that moment, the story of Ethan and Linda shifted from chance encounter to a turning point, a leap into emotional vulnerability and honesty that promised excitement, growth, and a profound connection, one that would require patience, understanding, and care, yet offered the rare chance at a love story that was full, real, and deeply meaningful, and as they held each other's gaze, both hearts beating in tandem, both understood that the next step, whatever it might be, was theirs to choose together. Because this was not just a fleeting attraction or a momentary fancy, but the beginning of something extraordinary, something that demanded courage, honesty, and the willingness to embrace the unexpected, and in that shared silence, full of anticipation and hope, both Ethan and Linda felt the first true stirrings of a love that could change everything. After Ethan's bold question hung in the air, Linda felt a whirlwind of emotions, surprise, disbelief, excitement, and fear, all tangled together, and she needed a moment to process, so she stood and moved toward the window, gazing out at the quiet street, the cool night air brushing against her face, trying to steady the rapid beat of her heart and untangle the thoughts swirling in her mind, because while the idea of love and marriage with Ethan thrilled her, she knew it wasn't simple, that such a step would carry questions, judgments, and complications, and yet in her chest, something soft and insistent whispered that this connection was real, that Ethan's courage to ask had opened a door she hadn't realized she was waiting for, and Ethan, watching her from across the room, felt the tension of the moment but also a strange calm, as if everything up to this point had been building toward this pause, this decision, and he knew he had to respect her space while silently hoping she would see what he saw, the depth of their bond, the ease of their connection, and the honesty that had grown between them over weeks of shared stories, laughter, and quiet understanding, and after a long moment, Linda turned back to him, her eyes glistening with unspoken emotion, a small, tentative smile appearing, because the vulnerability of this moment wasn't just his, it was hers too, and she knew that love required courage from both sides, honesty, and the willingness to face uncertainty together, and as she returned to the chair across from him, she spoke carefully, weighing each word, admitting that she hadn't expected this, that she hadn't imagined such a leap could come from someone she had known through another part of her life, and yet she confessed that she had thought about him more than she should have, about the way he made her feel seen, heard, and valued, about the comfort and excitement he brought without trying, and Ethan listened intently, feeling each word land in his heart, understanding that this was not a rejection but a doorway, a possibility, and when Linda continued, acknowledging that life would require patience, honesty, and careful navigation with her daughter and family. Ethan nodded, reassuring her that he was ready for that he wanted real love, not an easy path, and that he was willing to take each step slowly, carefully, and fully, because what mattered was them, their honesty, and the bond they had built. And as she absorbed his words, a quiet sense of hope and relief began to settle over her. Tears brimming not from sadness but from the weight of realizing that someone had chosen her fully and courageously, and that she could consider opening her heart without fear of judgment or haste. And in that moment, as they reached across the table and held hands, a gentle connection formed, not as a promise but as an acknowledgement that they were willing to explore this love together, step by careful step, recognizing the unusual nature of their relationship but embracing its authenticity. And in the soft silence that followed, filled with mutual understanding, anticipation, and excitement, both realized that the unexpected twists of life could lead to the most meaningful connections, that love often arrives when least expected, and that courage and honesty were the keys to making it real. And as they sat there, hands intertwined, hearts open, and minds imagining possibilities, the future felt uncertain but full of hope, because they had chosen to acknowledge their feelings, to respect each other, and to embrace the journey ahead, understanding that love is not about rushing, convenience, or perfection, but about vulnerability, trust, and willingness to face challenges together. And in that quiet, powerful moment, Ethan and Linda knew that while their story was just beginning, it had already changed both of them, had brought new light into lives that had known routine and loneliness, and had created a bond that was tender, deep, and full of the promise of joy, laughter, and shared dreams. A love story that would grow through patience, understanding, and courage, proving that sometimes the heart knows its path before the mind can catch up, and that choosing love, even when complicated, is always worth the risk. And as they finally stood together to leave, walking into the cool night hand in hand, the possibilities ahead felt endless, filled with hope, excitement, and the quiet certainty that they had found something extraordinary in each other, a rare connection that would guide them through the unknown, shaping a story of love, trust, and heartfelt commitment that neither would ever forget, a story that had begun with a chance encounter, grew through honesty and courage, and now promised a future that, while uncertain, was undeniably theirs to explore together.